Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin, potentially one of the most exciting kind of pairings of a driver and team going into 2021. Of course, you got Seb, a four-time world champion, being booted out of Ferrari last year and going to a team that's rebranded with an iconic car brand of Aston Martin. Obviously, Racing Point did some great work last year. Obviously, a little bit controversial at times as well, having a very strikingly new-looking car that looked a lot like a 2019 Mercedes, but they went on to win a race with Sergio Perez. So is it all exciting times coming up for them too in 2021? So with all of that, there's a lot of excitement, but also a lot of uncertainty about how that may go into 2021. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing why I think Sebastian Vettel, there is potential for Sebastian Vettel to be really reinvigorated at Aston Martin, and for that pairing to be a very successful one, not only short term, but maybe into the long term as well. So I'll admit this is a very different style of video that I'm used to doing on this channel, kind of like an opinion piece about Formula 1 itself, a topic in Formula 1, but this year I really want to do more content based off real life F1. Of course, I do a lot of gaming on this channel, but you guys know from, my previous experiences doing a podcast on F1 and stuff that I do with Veloce, that I do obviously just enjoy discussing the real sport, and I kind of missed having an outlet of that, so I want to hopefully do more of these opinion pieces over the year. So if you do go to enjoy this style of video, then definitely let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that like button. But let's get into this. So firstly, I do want to say I do like Sebastian Vettel. I want to see him do well. I like seeing Seb happy. I've really been quite upset seeing how frustrated he's been in the last year of F1, especially in that 2020 Ferrari. So there is going to be a bit of a bias from me in terms of, having a bit of optimism, maybe positivity that maybe is not warranted in a way for this next year for Seb and Aston Martin. So just want to preface that before we begin. But I think there is a lot of facts to look at that actually might, point to there being an actual genuine, chance of having Seb be, reset mentally, reinvigorated, and gelling well with Aston Martin and doing great things next season. There's a lot to be initially excited about of Seb being an Aston Martin. Seb in green, a breath of fresh air, basically, for not only him, but also his fans, I think, to see him in a different environment, and also just to see him in an environment where all the team personnel and the team truly really wants to get behind him once again, which I don't think we saw with Ferrari, especially so in 2020, but we already started to see that in 2019 as well. The Ferrari environment, you can't get away from it, became quite toxic for Sebastian with the team. I think it was very clear in some aspects. Obviously, there was still, personnel at the team that, really wanted Seb to do well, and Seb clearly had a very good relationship with his side of the garage at Ferrari, but I think higher up, there was maybe things going on in the background that we're fully never going to know, that I think made that environment very toxic for him. Now, back in 2014, when Ricciardo joined Red Bull Racing, Sebastian got wobbled by his then younger teammate, who was just as quick as him, if not even quicker in many instances, and that season, he finished in 5th place. Now go to 2019, a youngster comes in of Charles Leclerc, and Sebastian again gets wobbled by this younger teammate who is just as quick as him, and if not even quicker in many, many instances in that kind of way in 2019, and he finished in 5th place in the 2019 season. You can see the pattern that has formed here. The only difference is, this time round, because Sebastian has such a passion and love of Ferrari, he, didn't want to call it quits. He felt like, okay, I can adjust to this. I can maybe come back from this in 2020 and go on. And then, of course, before the season even began, thanks to the pandemic, but obviously delayed, but in that period of lockdown, we found out that Ferrari did not want to renew or even discuss with Sebastian renewing a contract for further years. So it wasn't up to him, but because of his love of Ferrari and the love of that brand, he wanted to stay put. So it was a very different situation to what happened at Red Bull, where he jumped ship straight away. But you can see the pattern that was there. It's a kind of pattern you're seeing there that Seb definitely needs the whole team around him, and there needs to be a kind of sense that they want to see him do well. And when Leclerc came in, obviously that wasn't the case anymore. Leclerc was always going to be the long-term bet for Ferrari, because the ship sort of sailed for Sebastian and Ferrari in 2017 and 18. Their two best years and best chances to win a championship. And once that ship sailed, I think the Ferrari team and definitely the personnel and the higher-ups saw Leclerc coming through. Obviously, the ranks, GP2, went to Sauber at the time, Sauber Alfa Romeo, and then finally at Ferrari. It was the natural path that he is their long-term silver bullet bet, at winning a Drivers' Championship and a Constructors, more so maybe with Sainz as well, into the future, into long term. And I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of why maybe Seb gets destabilized with something like that, with Leclerc coming in 2019 and so, and going on to basically establish himself as the team leader in a sense in 2020. And why it happened with Ricciardo in 2014 as well is, Seb's a very private, family-oriented guy, clearly very down to earth when you listen to him speak in interviews. So I think he really takes a lot of energy and drive from connecting and feeling the actual individual human personnel behind him, working on his car, the higher-ups, everyone back at the factory. I think he takes a lot of energy from knowing that everyone is going in the same direction as he is in terms of we all want to win, I want to win, and obviously with Ricciardo coming in, maybe some focus went to this young gun Australian who was very quick, and the same thing, this young gun guy who's been part of the Ferrari project for so long now, and everyone thinks, okay, you know what, this is Project Leclerc now, it's not Project Vettel, that ship's gone. And I think for him, mentally, that definitely destabilized him in 2019 and into 2020, and I think the same thing happened in 2014, so you can see that there is a correlation and a genuine kind of fact behind that, I think, with him. And as soon as Seb left Red Bull Racing, he had a mental reset, a refresh, and you clearly saw that with a spring in his step versus the frustrated Seb we saw in 2014, those frustrated radio messages we heard at the very start of the season when, it was a new era of the V6 era. Sebastian's been very vocal that he doesn't really enjoy these cars, even though quite kind of contradictory. He's a very well-educated, smart guy, and he actually realizes that Formula One needs to adapt for the future. It still doesn't stop him from complaining about the fact that he would rather, obviously, drive older style cars, but obviously you can have those two opinions and kind of coexist together. But he got very frustrated at the start of that new era, didn't really get used to the kind of way you had to drive the new V6 turbo engines with a lot more wheel spin on the rear end and having to have a really light foot on the right. And then also generally, I think the entire season frustrated him in terms of not getting on top of the car, and then obviously Ricciardo was just smashing it, getting those race wins. And you could see the exact same thing starting to creep into 2019. I think Russia, he got so upset when he had to retire. That was obviously no fault of Ferrari or the situation, just an engine failure. But then into 2020, so many times you saw him so frustrated and kind of just, cutting the crap with his engineer and just, telling how it is, like, we cannot, be this quick, we cannot get this race result, or, just telling him straight about how stupid the strategies were, or how, dislogical maybe some of the decisions they were making were throughout that entire season. So in that kind of regard, seeing that there's a pattern between, how he did in that difficult season, I think you can maybe say there might be a similar pattern of how he bounces back in a new team, in Aston Martin. I said in a recent video when we were doing predictions about the Formula One upcoming season that, form is temporary and class is permanent, and that's very true in Formula One. Very much so, I think, compared to maybe other sports where really sometimes your age really catches up with you. But Formula One, you can stay fit enough to drive these cars, especially now with the level of fitness these drivers kind of train to. Even older drivers, they can still kind of hang it. It's just about kind of getting that mental click of getting things right. And then obviously with Formula One, the best drivers stay in the best cars. So sometimes it's just unfortunate that you go down the pecking order in terms of what car you're in. But Seb is stepping into what is definitely not going to be a shoddy car in the form of Racing Point turned into Aston Martin. And speaking a bit more about the Aston Martin side of things, I think going back to what I said about Seb really connecting with individual humans and getting energy from that, I think even though there will be personnel at Aston Martin, especially on that side of the garage that used to take care of Perez's car, there'll be personnel that are upset that Perez was let go. But I mean, now that Perez has a drive, maybe they won't have such a grudge potentially that they might have done if Perez was off the grid. And I think there's not going to be a single person that factory that's not excited about having a four-time world champion come to their team. A driver that has won so many Grand Prix, broken so many records in the past, that's coming to their team, bringing that knowledge. There's a reason why Alfa Romeo actually kept on Kimi Räikkönen for this next season, even though a lot of people are calling for, a change, is because Kimi still gives such good feedback about the car, because you can't replace that feedback with a young gun. That feedback only comes from driving Formula One cars through the eras for so long, having understanding of what the feelings are through your arse, through your entire body when you drive on these cars. And Sebastian will bring that knowledge to Aston Martin. Now, I obviously know Sergio Perez has that similar experience, but Vettel may have a different kind of opinion, different kind of experience, having won multiple races. He'll know what they need to do to operate at that higher level like he did at Red Bull and did at Ferrari before, I guess, it all kind of started to go sour. Another exciting point to why maybe this will be a really exciting time for Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin is it's the first time Sebastian Vettel's actually going to be driving a Formula 1 car with a Mercedes power unit. A fact in this V6 era, which is a big deal because Mercedes remain the best power unit on the grid. Of course, Renault and Honda have made good strides. Ferrari, obviously, they'd made some strides, but then they had the whole 2019 saga. But that 2019 saga actually forced Mercedes to dig deeper because they didn't understand how Ferrari got so quick in a straight line. And so that actually forced Mercedes to dig even deeper with their engineers and find more performance, ironically, now in terms of compared to the competitors. So in a way, Ferrari's 2019 engine issue and the whole kind of, drama actually was a hindrance to every other manufacturer on the grid because Mercedes found more performance they may have not, maybe tried to find in 2019 and into 2020 if it wasn't for that whole saga with their engine and the kind of fuel burning or whatever it was, that private settlement. But even though Renault and Honda have improved, they have for sure, but I think Mercedes still overall over the course of this season, their engine is still the most consistent, the best performing in all kind of, regards, whether it be, overheating at one track or, having to change engine mode halfway through the season. They've always adapted so well, and there's no getting about it. It's going to be exciting to see Seb for the first time driving a Mercedes power unit for the first time in his career. He's been going up against Mercedes power units for so long now. To drive one, I think it's going to be exciting for him, but also exciting for us to watch in terms of how he gets to it. And going on to that point, the car is a completely different car. It's, the characteristics of how it drives is going to be completely different. Seb has been used to how the Ferrari handles. Now, as the last 2 years have gone on for Ferrari, the car kind of went away from suiting his style and suited Leclerc's way more. And that was very apparent in 2020. But even in 2019, it was kind of there with the philosophy Ferrari had for that year's car. When Leclerc came into Formula 1, he said in interviews, I think it was around the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in his first year in Formula 1, that he was not used to how much understeer there actually is in a Formula 1 car compared to the very oversteery GP2 cars he was used to. So he had to adapt his driving style to kind of get used to it because there's no way to go against that understeery nature. That's just how a Formula 1 car is. That's how the formula is compared to a GP2 car or an F2 car now. So he had to adapt his style. But then 2019 came along. The Ferrari was a bit more oversteery because there was a lack of downforce in that 2019 Ferrari car. And 2020 even more so had an even twitchier rear end. And that meant Leclerc could dip back into that oversteery driving style he enjoyed so much in GP2 and actually enjoyed the Ferrari probably more than he did the Sauber in 2018. Not just because it was a better car, but just the actual driving style was suiting his style more of kind of having that oversteery, twitchy rear end, kind of sorting it out mid-corner and just wrestling the car through. Whereas Seb, it's been known, he likes a very planted rear end. That's why he was so good in the V8 blown diffuser era, because it was a very weird way to drive. You almost put the throttle on when intuitively you thought not to get more downforce. And so he loved that kind of driving style of just having a rear end that was so nailed on. How many times we talk about that Red Bull car being on rails? Little did we know how on rails the Mercedes cars would now look. I think they would definitely crush the opposition if they went up against those old Red Bull cars now. But at the time, we were saying how on rails those Red Bulls were because of the blown diffuser and how good Seb was. Think back to Singapore, how dominant he was in that Red Bull car because it was just car machine and personnel and driver in tandem so much because he had that confidence on the rear end every time he put on the throttle. Like I said, in 2020, that issue for Seb of not liking an oversteery car but having to deal with one that was oversteery was even worse in 2020 because, he was booted out of the team. And usually, typically, when a driver is set to leave a team, they almost go on a bit of a gardening leave kind of in a way in terms of the debriefing and the info they're given, the info they give. It's a little bit different. When Hamilton announced he was going to leave McLaren, he said he was kind of shut out of meetings, certain meetings of McLaren because they don't want to give away secrets for next year's car. So all of that, I think, really explains maybe why Seb struggled even more so than he might have done last year and into those last 2 years of Ferrari, is because a combination of the car itself changing and then also the dynamic changing within the team, which is now going to be reset. Obviously, I know Lance Stroll has been there from the get-go with, for a few years now with Racing Point, now Aston Martin, but because Seb is so experienced and because it's such a massive signing for them, I think Aston Martin would be stupid to, obviously not maybe lean the car a bit more towards him as well. Obviously, they'll take feedback from Stroll on board, but I think you would say the setup would probably be they start to try and get a car that Seb can drive. 2021 Aston Martin is very much going to be an influence from how Perez and Stroll develop that 2020 car, and even more so than any other year, if we talk about drivers having influences on cars and, changing teams, more so than any year ever in Formula One, this will be true now, because this year, because of the pandemic, the 2021 Aston Martin is literally the 2020 Racing Point car with the trimmed floor and obviously some new aero bits, but those are brand new that the team are developing for this season. So the baseline is literally the same car as last year. So it literally is Perez's car that he's stepping into. Now, Perez has been known for being very good on his tyres, good with traction, but that's obviously a lot to do with him, but also the car that he's helped develop, I'm sure, helped him in terms of those traction zones. So maybe with the Mercedes power unit being a bit more, a nicer drivability maybe compared to what he was used to with the Ferrari engine of last year, the actual car itself may allow Seb to actually drive a little bit smoother, maybe stop those kind of infamous spins or mistakes maybe from him where, so many times he was, just snapping because the car would bite him back. The Racing Point seemed to be a very stable car last year, so that stability, I think, is going to really help Sebastian Vettel for next year, and obviously they'll continue to develop it, and it's going to be interesting to see how Aston Martin develop. That's the big caveat for them as a team, Aston Martin, is, okay, they copied the 2019 Mercedes car, worked well for them in 2020. In my opinion, they didn't make the most of the car, but they actually, did obviously still do well at some races where they did make the most of it, and they went on for a race win. But now's the real testament. Now, 2021, no copying can be done, and it's the same car as last year. Can they continue to outdevelop their rivals like McLaren or Alpine to continue to, strive to bridge that gap to the top teams? That's another question mark that's going to have to be answered by Aston Martin. Aston Martin used to be Racing Point, used to be Force India. They're a team that are used to doing more with the resources they have, the little resources they have. They're the team that's punched above and actually, done insane seasons and results. So I think not just for this next year, but long term, I think if Sebastian was to stay at Aston Martin and long term for the team, I think this is a very exciting project, because with those new cost cap saving and money saving measures that Formula One are bringing in the short term, in reality, Aston Martin is still the same team as they were last year with Racing Point. They're still going to be the team that's working on budgets, that's working on, trying to do more than what they have. And so with the cost cap coming in, they're not having to go down so much in terms of how much they're spending, whereas Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, even McLaren will have to try and budget down, whereas Aston Martin can kind of stay put where they are because the cost cap favors, the budget they're already running at in a sense. So compared to other teams, they might be able to adapt way more to that cost cap measure compared to the top teams, and so they might have an advantage actually going into this next season, but probably more so into 2022. Now, like I said at the start, I am very positive because I want to see Seb do well. I'm not a fan of any one driver in the same way I used to with Jenson Button, but I like certain drivers. I like to see them do well. I want to see Seb do well. But the counterpoint to this, all of this, will be his doubters will say he's completely past it, and maybe he is. Athletes at some point, in their careers, they do just get past their peak. And Seb, he's never going to be as good as he was in his Red Bull days. He's never going to even be good as he was maybe in his peak Ferrari days in 2017 and 2018. It's just not possible. Every athlete, once they get past that, they can maybe find a plateau. Once they're past their peak, they can maybe find some sort of middle ground and plateau and just see out the back end of the career in a really nice way. I think an athlete that comes to mind is Cristiano Ronaldo. He's definitely past his peak. He's not as, lightning quick maybe as he used to be in his Man United days or his very, very, peak Real Madrid days. But he's adapted his playing style to still, play at the highest level and still get consistent goals over the course of the season for Juventus. And it's the same thing with, Formula One drivers. Maybe they need to adapt to the situation. They need to maybe do training in different ways to make sure that age doesn't catch up with them. In terms of sharpness, they definitely need to try and find a middle ground of keeping that sharpness. And for Seb, I think maybe a little bit was that was lost because of that mental kind of cloudiness of Ferrari. So there is potential for him just to keep going down until that point where he hits the ground and he retires. That could very much happen. He could maybe not find that plateau and come back a little bit and find that middle ground of sharpness again and kind of driving talent, essentially, and kind of refine his form. That could happen. We don't know. The hope is that he resets like he did at Ferrari, but I very much also, understand that he very much could not, and we could just see him go down and down and down, and maybe he just won't re-sign for Aston Martin and he will retire at the end of his Aston Martin contract. It's definitely something that is, maybe a possibility. And the big thing was also mentally for him since Hockenheim 2018. I think that, clicked for him. I think that definitely, we've never seen the same Seb ever since. It's a shame, but it happens. That a big thing like that, a big moment where you were, fighting for a championship, leading the championship, looking so comfortable and really good with a really good 2018 Ferrari car, must be said. And then for that to happen and for his rival to come back in such amazing fashion in the same race, it's going to take a toll on your mental ability in terms of dealing with that, and I don't think he's fully recovered from that. So that's where I'm at. That's my kind of opinion and kind of look and take at Sebastian Vettel at Aston Martin, and why I hope he could be reinvigorated. There is a big if, there's a big hope there. But I think all the facts are there to say that if, he can get past this mental thing, if he can reset himself, history does dictate that he could actually bounce back really well. And he is a 4-time world champion. Pedigree, like I said, maybe doesn't mean so much if you're getting on and it's been a while since you won the championships, but he's still a 4-time world champion, so never say never in Formula 1, like I say. But yeah, that's where we're going to end it off, and I invite you guys to let me know what you make of all of that in the comments below, what your own opinions are. And as I said, if you did enjoy this very different opinion style piece on a real life Formula 1 topic, then do let me know in the comments below, because I would love to do more videos like this maybe throughout the year. If that's something you guys enjoy, be sure to hit the like button at the same time, obviously, to let me know that you do enjoy it. If you are new around here, do get subscribed for more of this kind of content. But obviously, if you look around my channel, there's a lot of gaming stuff that, even if you've never watched gaming stuff, you may be interested in it if you watch one or two of the videos. But yeah, I've been aarava. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.